The tender whisper of love, the dead of night, and you tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. I see that you're searching for answers far and wide, but we're all searching for answers. You provide 'cause you know what we need before we say a word. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways.
Yeah, well,
You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways.
you did, right? There was a young lady who wrote churches to her. And I was here for a while when I hadn't seen her, so I talked to her about what they could do.
Undeniable, hardly speak, peace,
My son sometimes leads
unexplainable
on every day. He always
hardly think as you call,
yeah, I think it 2 weeks ago.
deeper still as you call,
So hey, there's Lindsay, is it just me and you guys on?
as you call me.
Okay. I don't know if I can set my phone where I can see all the faces, so we'll just have to deal with it.
It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways.
I was talking about Peg.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. So we had a laptop decided to update Windows, and so we can't Zoom from there, nor can we go here. It's on my phone here. I see Dennis right now, and I don't know how to set my phone to see more people. But so Dennis, until somebody else speaks, you know, you're the face that I get to see. Okay.
Watching you.
All right, let's talk. There's a couple things that are coming up. First part of We Care Bear Ministries are going to meet. I don't know what that schedule is because that's 4th of July weekend or week of. So I don't know what their schedule is right now. I'll check with Linda Ward about that. But the following week on the 14th is the Prime Timers are going to meet, and we're going to work on a craft project here and down in the fellowship hall, and then we're going to have lunch with Olive Garden, lasagna and salad and breadsticks, or just salad and breadsticks if you wanted to go light. So you can register for that online. We send a link out in the Monday MHCOC recap. What's that? And you can click on that link and you can register. You can pay online, or you can pay us later. That's fine. We'll make sure you pay though. So, all right. So here's a few prayer needs that's going on. Kay Plaster has made a little improvement, but it's still going to be somewhere along the way. The family's going to have to make a decision to move her to a facility.
Has anybody seen her? I was there Sunday and she was completely unresponsive.
Kathy was there yesterday.
Okay, she was better? No, still.
Okay, we saw her when?
We saw her Saturday, but I'm not even sure, I wouldn't use the word a little improvement.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I would use the word, I got lucky with what she.
yeah. Brenda's saying she wouldn't use the word little improvement. I don't want to paint too rosy a picture with the word improvement. Compared to before where there was no response whatsoever, Brenda was getting some response, and the family's been getting some response. So,
I think the words get out isn't really a response. That's just the way Brenda, his reactions.
yeah, people respond to Brenda, that's for sure.
My son mentioned something on Facebook about cutting back one of the medications that makes her unresponsive.
Yes, a seizure med, I think,
Seizure
yeah.
meds, and so-
Yeah, they're going to dial back some of her seizure meds and just see where that lands her. But she, it's still not an optimistic.
Kathy said they were doing a brainwave yesterday.
Yes, okay,
Yeah, I mean, I would think,
all right.
who knows, but yes, that's what they were doing. Yeah.
Kathy said they were going to do a brainwave yesterday, so or sometime, okay. So Ramona Thompson was out trimming her shrubbery and trimmed the tips of her fingers. So they took her last night to the ER, and she is home now. They 9 stitches in one, a few stitches in another. They glued the others, sealed shut. So she's okay.
Can you speak up?
She's okay, but she's not okay. So, but she's home now, and Martha's kind of washing out after her. And I think the family took away her hedge trimmers. So that's
Everything's intact, it's just
damaged.
stitches.
One hand, just one.
It's her right hand and she's left-handed.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Also got a phone call from Wes Ham, who mentioned 2 of his friends, Orlando and Crystal, and their family. They're dealing with some real complicated issues, and with some having to deal with a lot of legal issues too. And there's not a lot of understanding that goes with that when you're dealing with legal issues. You're a stranger, they make decisions based on whatever. So it's a real concern for them and for Wes and Cheryl, and so they've asked us to be praying for Orlando and Crystal. So you guys who are on the Zoom, we couldn't get the laptop updated quickly enough, so you're on my phone. So the people here can't see you, and we have limited communication. You can make comments, just speak up, and I'll share them with the people, but you're on a very small screen right now. So just wanted to let you know that is a little bit different tonight versus a regular night. Yes, Jim?
You mentioned Jaden Stevens yet?
Oh, yeah, no. Oh, so Janet Stevens went in for a heart cath, and they determined she had a blockage, 80%. They put a stent in They had a minor complication with that, so they kept her overnight. She's home now, I think. I haven't talked to her when they got home.
Yeah, she's home and doing okay.
Okay, so she's home now and doing well. They're thankful that they caught it before they had any kind of real heart issues with that. But it's kind of unnerving when you're having to go in and do all those procedures. You weren't planning for them. They also had, I don't know if they had any damage, but they had a lot of limbs down in their yard from the storm that blew through, and their neighborhood had a lot of damage. And I know they had some heavier damage out there because they were without power for over 24 hours out their way. So, and that was, so it's been a full week for them. Keep them in your prayers. Anything else we need to announce tonight? Prayer needs or good news or just info you want to share?
Scott,
Hold on a minute here. Yes?
can you hear me all right?
I can hear you, yes.
My twin brother Dale is having a cardiac ablation procedure on the 25th.
Okay.
A couple of days. It's not a super involved process. And then I'm having a stress test on Tuesday.
Okay. So Dennis's brother's having a cardiac ablation on the 25th. Dennis is having a stress test this coming Tuesday. Is that correct? And I'm assuming you're still having breathing issues or?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, you've already been through it a good bit, so I know your radar is keenly attuned to those things. So we'll be praying for simple answers to the problems you're facing and good news from your brother's upcoming procedure. Yes.
Oh, I just wanted, when you said good news, I was gonna say your parking lot looks real nice.
Oh yeah, the parking lot looks nice. Sunday before last, it looked very nice too, but people parked all over the place. There were no lines, so now we got lines. So.
And up there is beautiful.
Oh, up here, yeah. So we've added a few more things up here. You guys on Facebook, on the live stream can't see, but we have a jungle gym up here now, so kids can play up here, so that's good. No? Too far? Okay, all right.
Scott,
Yes, Terry.
episode 6 of The Chosen starts tonight at 8.
Yes, I have not really announced that. I just assumed people who cared were watching. But I've been watching this season 2. It is phenomenal. Most of the time when I watch Christian-related productions, I have to give it, I have to grade on the curve. There you go. Because I go, well, it's not all great, but it's Christian, it's good. This is superb. And every episode, I'm just intrigued with how the writers weave it all together. And it is not all, it is a mixture of background fiction, but true stories from the life of Jesus. But sometimes the background of those people is fictitious. And I was watching an interview about that, and they were talking about sometimes when we read the Bible stories and the miracles, they're profound to us, but because we don't know the backstories, we may miss some of the personal celebrations that people experience. And even though these backstories are sometimes fictitious, it does help us participate more fully with the story of Jesus. So if you are not watching The Chosen, we encourage you to do that. I'm going to let you, you can watch it from your phone, you can watch it, you can cast it to your TV. Tonight they're releasing episode 6 of season 2. So if you haven't watched any of it, you can go back and watch all of season 1 and then the first 6 episodes of season 2. They don't, in the past, they have not released them weekly. They just release them when they get them done. So 1 or 2 times they release 2 in a row. And then we're 2 or 3 weeks before the next one's released. So thank you, Terry, for mentioning that, because I think that show would be a great benefit for all of our members to watch. All right, David.
I got a message from downstairs from Miss Biddy May, her request about this article from KSTK saying that Missouri leads in U.S. leads U.S. in rate of new COVID cases.
Missouri, an article said that Missouri leads the U.S. in the rate of new COVID cases. Okay, all right.
It's mostly in the west. St.
Mo-
Louis City and St. Louis County was actually the lowest. But
Okay.
it's out in the west.
So St. Louis City and County are doing well. It's mainly out west. But it does, we have this new Delta variety of it, and everything I've been reading says that the vaccines that we get protects us from it, if not, oftentimes from getting it, but almost always from getting it seriously. But just be aware that we are still encouraging people to stay distanced here, even if you're not wearing a mask, keep your distance some, because there's still a level of risk for certain of our members out there. We want to protect and honor that. So thanks, David, for mentioning that. I thought you were going to mention, because Brenda mentioned the other night, today, 12 shootings in St. Louis in one night. St. Louis leads the nation in some metrics of a number of gun homicides. So people, our communities that we live in and call home, and people in general need something to motivate them to see the world differently. Christ is going to do that if people can find him or be shown him, and that's our mission. So, all right, let's start with a prayer. God, we're thankful for tonight, for our gathered group here. We pray your blessings upon all of us. We ask you to be with our study tonight and help us learn something that really affects and changes our outlook for the future. We pray for all those that we mentioned tonight in our prayers, for the many who are hospitalized or have been undergoing tests or awaiting results from tests. We just pray that you bring healing to all those that we care for. We pray that your presence is palpably experienced by them. And we pray that more than anything else, that people have strength and courage and stamina to move forward with faith. And we ask this through your Son. Amen. All right. So tonight we're going to look at the book of Nehemiah. We're kind of jumping out of order here. We're going to circle back to Ezra later on. But I kind of want to jump here first. So let me begin by saying this, by asking this. Can you describe a time when you felt overwhelmed with the challenges that you were facing? A time when you were facing whatever kind of challenges they were, and you just felt small to the task.
New parents.
What?
New parents.
New parent. Okay, new parents can feel that way. Yeah, it's always exciting to have a baby until you have one. It's like, whoa, this is a big undertaking here. And then some people decide they're going to have two more, or one more, So we just need to be concerned about them. So, what other kind of things have you experienced? Seasons in your life where you just felt overwhelmed?
Dealing with aging parents.
Okay, dealing with aging parents. Other side of that equation.
A sick child.
What's that?
Sick child.
A sick child. Yeah. You might have experienced some time before where you did a great job in creating your resume and selling yourself in the interview, and you got the job, and then you realize, oh no, I've got to perform here, and I don't really know how to do all this stuff. And they kind of think that I'm the whiz at this because I've done a pretty good job of marketing myself. So overwhelmed with that. I'm not a real defender of the Hollywood elite, but there are plenty of people that you see on TV and in movies who are surprised as you are that they are there, and are always fearful that they're going to be discovered as a fraud and cut loose. And I can't imagine having a career, especially one that outwardly looks like it's such a privileged career, and then be inside, waking up in the middle of the night wondering about, who's gonna find out that I'm not as great as my PR team has laid me out to be. So yeah, there's a lot of things that we face in life, moments, seasons, events in life where we just feel totally overwhelmed by it. And I kind of think that's where Nehemiah was. as we cover this story from his book. So chapter 1, verse 1. If you have your Bibles, you can turn there. Chapter 1, verse 1. Nehemiah means the Lord comforts. And Nehemiah had the job of comforting. He also needed some comforting from the Lord here. But what do we find out from verse 1 about Nehemiah? Okay, he was in Susa, okay. Son of this guy, we don't know who this guy is, Hakaliah, okay. He's in the citadel of Susa. Do you know where that is? All right, so Susa is the capital of the Persian Empire. So this is where Nehemiah is. Now, he's a Jew. Remember how all this happened here? We have the Assyrian Empire. All these empires ruled for extended period of time, and they just kind of waved in and out of power in the region. But Assyria's, from our storyline, really reached their apex of power in around 800 BC, in the 800s. And this is where they came and they captured, they defeated and exiled the northern kingdom. In fact, they almost defeated the southern kingdom. But they were called away to protect another part of their kingdom. And so the army that had laid siege to Jerusalem withdrew and went to protect another part of the country. Scripture lays that out as if God was the one who provided that layer of protection for Jerusalem. And I'm sure that he was. So that's Assyria in the 800s. Then we have the Babylonians in the 700s. Really, it was a, what do you call that in England when they put together different factions of parties, a coalition government, that's it. It was a coalition government of Persians and Medes and some others, but they got tired of Assyria, so they defeated the Assyrians. And so the Persian king was the one that really took power and ruled. And the Persians were the Babylonian king was the one that really took power and ruled, okay? And this is what we talked about last week, where the Babylonians came in and did defeat Jerusalem, laid siege to it, and starved the people out, burned the temple, burned the grand houses, destroyed the walls of the city, and took their smartest and wisest and put them back in their home country. So this is the Babylonians. 722 BC 586 BC. I'm getting myself muddled here. 800s, 700s, 600s, okay, Babylonians. And then we have, just 100 years later, the Persian Empire. Persia was one of the countries that sided with Babylon to defeat the Assyrians, and then they decided, well, we have enough of you too. So sometimes we'll call it the Medo-Persian Empire, because it was a coalition government too. The Medes and the Persians came together, and they defeated the Babylonians. Remember the handwriting on the wall in Daniel, I believe? That was from the Medo-Persian defeat of the Babylonians, okay? And so now, Nehemiah is in the capital city of Persia, in the citadel, the palace, the ruling house of Susa, the capital city there. So it's in November, December of the year, and he King Cyrus earlier had announced that the Jews could go home. Now, Jeremiah had told the people earlier, 70 years you're going to be in captivity. And sure enough, 70 years later, King Cyrus came to rule and he let them go home. But not all the Jewish people went home. Next week we're going to look at Esther. Esther didn't go home. She stayed because you have family, you have jobs, you have careers, you're settled now. So some didn't go. Nehemiah didn't go back, because Nehemiah had a powerful position in the government there, so he didn't go back. But several did go back, and And so, yes, sir.
Was Nehemiah born in Judah?
Good question. He said, was Nehemiah born in Judah? I don't have the answer to that, but I would assume not. Even though people still lived a little longer than they do now, they lived closer to our ages, and this would have been 70 years after the captivity. So I suspect he was probably born in Babylon or Persia. But I may be wrong about that, so look it up and prove me wrong. I would enjoy being corrected on that. But every good Jew in Persia read the Jerusalem Times, all right? They knew what was going on back home. And in fact, somebody came to visit, maybe to appear before the king, I'm not sure, and he met with Nehemiah, and Nehemiah says, tell me what's going on at home, all right? He wanted the scoop from an eyewitness who had been there. And now let's look at verse 3 and 4, because here's what this visitor said. Those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The walls of Jerusalem are broken down. Its gates have been burned with fire. And then, this is Nehemiah speaking, when I heard these things, I sat down and I wept. For some days I mourned and I fasted and I prayed before the God of heaven. So, this moved him. So what about this report? Why would that cause him such despair?
That's the motherland. That's
Okay, that's the motherland. Let me tell you, Jewish people still today, back then also, speak of Jerusalem as, the place. This is the promised city. This is the jewel of Canaan. So, yes. But what about the report made him despair at its state? What did the report say? Yeah, the walls are broken down, which would mean what for them?
People are vulnerable.
Say it again?
People are vulnerable.
Yeah, the people there are vulnerable. We're back, but we have no security about tomorrow or the next day or whoever's going to come in. Yeah. Gates are torn down. People are despondent about this. No movement in this. This has been some time now since the first wave went back. All right? So still no movement in rebuilding these walls. And Nehemiah is troubled by this. It also says at the end, I think it's verse 11, we get one last tidbit about Nehemiah. Am I wrong? Is it verse 11? I was the what? What was his job? Was that verse 11 or not?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And it's almost like out of the blue here. He's talking about something like, and I was the cupbearer of the king. And it's like, I don't know if I would conclude with, I'm the guy that brought the king his food, okay? I'm the waiter. So, what do you think this cupbearer thing is all about? Yes, sir?
Would you have to taste the food or taste the drink?
Okay, some people will say that. Yeah, this is the guy who is a food taster or the drink taster for the king. So that may well be part of this. Well, if he is the drink taster for the king, what does this say about how Nehemiah is viewed in the palace?
He's very trusted.
Very trustworthy. Yes. Okay. Steve, you were going to say something?
That's what I was going to say.
Trustworthy. Okay.
Position of trust.
All right. Some would say also the cupbearer was also the guy who just made sure every need of the king is being met. So he might have been the you tell me what is the position? The position of the. You don't even know I'm going to say yet. Beside the President of the United States, not an elected office, but the guy who keeps his schedule and stuff. Chief of Staff, yeah. Chief of Staff. Like, I can't tell you who the Chief of Staff is today. I should, but I can't tell you that. But let me tell you, everybody in Washington knows who the Chief of Staff is, right? because you don't get to Biden unless the chief of staff says you can get to Biden, okay? So he's a powerful position. Maybe that Nehemiah had that kind of power in the kingdom. Well, no wonder he didn't go back to Jerusalem, right? I mean, he's in a nice setup here. So, this is where he gets this report. Things are bad back in Jerusalem. The walls are torn down. The gates aren't set in their place. People are not working on it. They're despondent. They're despairing. And Nehemiah is just grieved by this. And he just can't eat. He fasts and he prays about this. And in fact, the king of Persia notices, right? He says, what's going on here? And Nehemiah says, look, here's what's going on. And I love this king because he says, what do you want? This is the kind of relationship they have. What do you want? And although we don't get an answer from Nehemiah right then, we find out pretty soon what Nehemiah gets, okay? He gets to go back to Jerusalem. But you can tell he's well respected because the king of Persia says, okay, you can go, but when are you coming back here, right? I need you here, okay? So he's able to go back and do that. He takes with him a platoon of soldiers to protect him on the way and to give him a level of authority. He gets letters from the king of Persia, right? To provide safe passage. And also, because Nehemiah is going to need supplies if he's going to attempt this project, so he says, hey, these letters will get you all the wood you need, all the stone you need, everything else. You just take these letters with you. So this is where Nehemiah goes. And he heads over to Israel, to Jerusalem, to think about this project. Does that sound like a daunting project to you? This makes most of my crises pale in comparison, you know. But this is where he is. Now, here's what I want to lay out for you. This is a monumental task for Nehemiah. So one or two I'm going to make up, and then the rest of them, they're going to be in Scripture. One is this. Donna's going, you can't make up this stuff. I'm going to make it up. Because one thing is this. I'm making this up. I don't know that wall building is in Nehemiah's skill set. All right? I don't have any evidence about that, but I suspect he's not an engineer. So he may be taking on a project that he is going to have to manage, but he doesn't know squat about how to do it. Have you ever been in a job like that before? Where you had to manage people who knew more about the job than you knew about the job? All right, so that's, is that Boeing?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Think about the size of this project. This is not like build a retaining wall in your backyard, right? Yes, sir.
How many city blocks do you think Jerusalem took up? I mean,
It is almost as if I paid you to ask that question right now. Because really, we don't know. And here's what we don't know. Jerusalem, size of Jerusalem ebbed and flowed over history, okay? And because it had been larger, because they had come back after destruction, it might have been smaller. But it clearly was the Temple Mount, and it probably clearly was the city of David that hung down below. Modern Israel is this plus, modern Jerusalem is this plus about that, all right? Modern Israel is really like that and then suburbs, okay? But this is, so still it's daunting because the best speculation is this. It is somewhere between 2 and 4 miles of wall. And have you seen the wall around Jerusalem? This is not like a timber wall, you know. This is not like a lattice fence you build. This is stone and piled upon stone. Herod's temple, now this predates Herod's temple. Herod's temple took stones that were as big as this opening here, and this high and this wide, and set them in place. But these guys I am always amazed when I look at ancient cultures and see what kind of engineering feats they could accomplish without the modern technology that we have. So this is no small project. Um, when Nehemiah got there, he also did a lot of covert exploration. Look at chapter 2, verse 12. I set out during the night with a few others. I had not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts, horses with me, except for the one that I was riding on. Why do you think Nehemiah does this covert, and really he's going out and examining the wall? Why do you think he's doing this at night, covertly, not having told anyone else yet?
Crazy idea.
What?
It's a crazy idea.
Okay, one, crazy idea, all right? First of all, we don't know the answer to this question, okay? So don't feel like I'm going to point you to the verse and then your answer is going to be wrong, because we don't know. I mean, yeah.
I want to get the people's expectations up.
All right, yeah, okay. Well, hey, that's a good one. You know, it's like, hey, God told me to come rebuild the wall. I think I better go check it out before I decide. I'm going to tell people we're going to rebuild the wall, okay? So, yeah. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
There are probably,
If he was looking for something, maybe unfavorable people or like.
Ah, okay. Hold on to that for a moment. We'll get there. Yes, Trevor.
I was just saying there's probably enemies in the area that would not be would not look fondly upon them rebuilding this wall. It'd be a threat to them.
Sure.
That's all.
Sure. In fact, we're going to look at more of those as we go through this. But yeah, some enemies. I mean, you know, a weak Jerusalem is a godsend for these other city-states that are out surrounding them, you know. And a rebuilt wall is a threat to them. So Nehemiah wanted to play this close to the vest. And that's what Bree was saying back there too. One thing that you may not always think about, but this is going to come out later on, is, you know, sometimes your worst enemies are even in your own camp. Right? I mean, I start telling people we're going to rebuild the wall, and all of a sudden, ran, you know. And before I even get time to rally the troops, people are casting aspersions about the project. So Nehemiah clearly understands that there are a lot of ways this can go wrong. Correct? So he doesn't have the skill set. It's a huge project, and he's having to deal with the politics of how do I even get this thing off the ground? So I've looked through this story, and I've kind of categorized four different challenges that Nehemiah faced. Okay, and I want to, as we look at this, I want to compare also to how are these challenges for us too. Okay, so the first one is this: he had to convince the local rulers of the importance of this project. Because remember, what was the report coming back when he was back in Susa? Walls are down, gates are broken down, and people are discouraged. They're despairing. So there's plenty of people probably back home who are saying, ain't gonna happen. So how do you inspire hope in a people who have lost hope? That's a huge undertaking. Preachers have this task oftentimes where we speak before groups, you know, so we're, you know, good politicians have that role, you know, to say, hey, this is, you know, economy may be tough, but we got, you know, I watched a show the other day about Winston Churchill. You know, believe me, if you looked at World War II before the U.S. got involved with it, it was like, there is no way England's going to survive this, right? In fact, many of the politicians in England were like, let's make a peace treaty with Hitler right now. And Hitler was like, you know, all I have to offer is blood and sweat and toil, you know, so, but he had the amazing ability to inspire hope in people in the midst of the blitz that was going on, right? He had the ability to inspire that kind of hope on people. Have you ever had that? Have you ever felt the weight of that? I think sometimes we can even feel it in our own family. Have your kids ever been hopeless and you had to convince them that, life is good and then you, of course, as a parent, you have the added weight of, that your kids think you lie to them all the time about how good they are, right? So you're having to convince them of something without overly convincing them, because then they're going to disregard you. But the idea of helping your children see their possibilities through your eyes, not their eyes, that's a daunting task, isn't it? Church leaders, elders have that something with the church. So, yeah, it can be overwhelming. He says in chapter 2, verse 17, "Then I said to them, you see the trouble we're in? Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace." And there was more to that speech than that. But there's soaring music behind that. Okay, he's saying let's get to work. We can do this. That's an amazing challenge. Secondly, he had to coordinate the work of a lot of independently minded people so that they can work together in a cooperation to build this big project. And I keep looking over here at Bruce, because he worked at Boeing for a while, and Bruce, I suspect, knows all about this. I don't know if you were the lone worker in your own little project, but either you had to involve other people or you were involved in it, because you don't build a major airplane with one person putting it together, right? And the thing about it is many of these designers think that their part of the airplane is the most important part of the airplane, and they've got to somehow pull together and work as a cohesive unit, not just as individual people. And we fly across the U.S. in commercial craft and military craft, do amazing acrobatics in the air. Not because of one engineer, because teams of people came together and did amazing things. So he had that task. Chapter 3 lays this out, and I really encourage someone to read through chapter 3 and don't be boggled with all the names, okay? Because here's what chapter 3 says. It begins with this. Elisha, the high priest, and his fellow priests went to work and rebuilt the sheep gate. They dedicated it, and they set its doors in place, building as far as the Tower of the 100, which they dedicated, and as far as the Tower of Hanel. Okay? So that they began at the sheep gate. Now keep that in mind, because the rest of the chapter lists 38 other teams who took their portion of the wall to rebuild it. And they just, and as it's described, they're going around in a circle, because look at chapter 3, verse 12. I'm sorry, not that one. Look at chapter 3, verse 32. 3:32. And between the rooms above the corner and the sheep gate, the goldsmiths and merchants made repairs. Where are we back to now? Yeah, we began at the sheep gate, we're ending at the sheep gate. And in between all that, if you'll just look through it, 39 different family groups or teams of people are mentioned who are just like, okay, I'm from this point here, and we are rebuilding. Sometimes they would rebuild because their house was right on the other side of that. So they just got up every morning, went out there and rebuilt their section of the wall. Sometimes they had special skills, and so they needed them to do that particular job there. But every team did their part. In fact, chapter 3, verse 12. I love this one here. Shallum, the son of Halosheth, ruler of a half district of Jerusalem, repaired the next section with the help of his daughters. Now, people did, people were not so pigeonholed into gender categories about the jobs they had. But still, there was women's work and there was men's work, okay? And what does this verse tell you about this project, about this man, about this family? Everybody just jumps in, right? He didn't have sons to rebuild the wall, but he says, we're taking a part. We're taking a section, and me and my daughters, we're gonna do this. And they did. That's just amazing to me. Some were people of nobility, others were priests. Some took a section because they lived real near there. Others came from other cities outside Jerusalem, and they sent a team over to rebuild that. Some were skilled tradesmen. Others just grabbed their daughters and just started heaving stones. They just made this work their priority. And the tough thing is Nehemiah had to coordinate all that, right? You start here, you end here, don't cross over, he's going to get mad at you. You know, you got to, we're all going to build. And the thing about it is, when you build a wall like that, these two sides have to be integrated, right? You just can't have 39 different walls. They're going to fall over. You need to have them connected so they're all working together. So this is what they were doing. All right. He also dealt with internal conflict. Remember we talked about sometimes the worst enemies are the ones in your own camp. Chapter 3, verse 5. We get a hint of it here. It says, the next section was repaired by the men of Tekoa, but their nobles would not put their shoulders to the work under their supervision. So we get the idea that the men of the town wanted to build it, but the nobility said, we're not going to help with that. We got things to do. So we're going to see more of that division between the haves and the have-nots in this, okay? But we see it right there. In fact, in chapter 5 is all about this internal conflict. So they come to complain to Nehemiah about what's going on. And let's look at some of the things they're complaining about. Men and their wives raised a great outcry against their fellow Jews. So they have several complaints here. Some were saying, we and our sons and our daughters are numerous. In order for us to eat and stay alive, we must have grain. So what are they not getting? Yeah, so understand, if you're working night and day on the project, you can't go harvest your fields. You can't, and you may not be getting paid to do this. This is a work of honor. So how are we going to handle all that? So these people are saying, we don't have enough food to eat. We're committed to this project, but we cannot keep doing this without more food. Verse 3, others are saying, we are mortgaging our fields and our vineyards and our homes to get grain during the famine. Now think about that. They're working on the wall. Instead of going out and working their fields, they're mortgaging their houses to get the grain so they can continue working on this project here. Verse 4, we've had to borrow money to pay the king's taxes on our fields and our vineyards. Taxes from Persia, even local taxes, were high at times, and people had to sometimes sell. You know, it's like the estate tax on farmers. You got to sell your farm in order to pay the tax to keep from being arrested. So, in fact, verse 5 says this: some of our daughters have already been enslaved, but we're powerless because our fields and our vineyards belong to others. Think about this now. They've mortgaged their fields, so now it's not theirs anymore. Now they're just tenant farmers. Now they've got other debts, so they are submitting their family members in slavery, so they can keep paying the bills. This is a financial crisis going on in the country, and they're coming to Nehemiah. Yes.
As far as the slavery, that's not an ongoing thing. That would be forgiven every 7 years so they could see the end?
More than likely, especially if it's Jewish slavery, yes. And I suspect most of this was, because some of the complaints, at least when Nehemiah goes to solve the complaints, he's talking to the Jewish nobility, not He didn't talk to Persia about this. He talked to the Jewish nobility. So, yes, you are correct. But 7 years is a long time to wait to get some relief for your problem here. So, what we're seeing is this. While the masses are focused on this project, there's always some people who are saying, how can I make a buck out of this? And so some were taking advantage in order to pad their own bank account. And when Nehemiah found out about that, he says, this is in verse 9 of chapter 5, he says, what you're doing is not right. Shouldn't you walk in the fear of God to avoid the reproach of our Gentile enemies? We'll talk more about what he was doing later, but do you find that internal conflicts are the most draining kind of conflicts you have to deal with? I mean, it takes all my energy to focus on the enemies that I know and can identify. And then to have to turn around and worry about somebody who I thought was on my side, had my back, and now they're working against me. And then it's like, I mean, can you imagine that being terribly discouraging? So, and we see it all the time, about the time when things turn good, when everybody's working together, when it seems like we've got some momentum, somebody's out there going to throw a monkey wrench in this thing and put an end to it. So, Terry, thank you for speaking up. I can't see everybody, so feel free to jump in at any time. Don't worry about interrupting. I really want to hear from the Zoomers as well, okay? But the one that we have most of the time in Scripture in this story is the opponents from outside. Because we have these kings of city-states in the region who are threatened by what's going on in Jerusalem right now. And they want to do everything within their power to put an end to it. So we have people like Sanballat and Tobias, and they are really working, excuse me, they're really working behind the scenes and directly to put an end to this project. So, first of all, they're ridiculing the workers. I mean, this is the speakers outside the city gate just telling people how hopeless their cause was. Listen to what he's saying. This is in chapter 4. What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back to life from those heaps of rubble that are burned as they are? What are these buildings? Even a fox climbing on it would break down the walls of stone. I don't know about you. I really depend upon a pat on the back and an attaboy every once in a while. So I'll do a project and I'll call Brenda and says, what do you think? And I don't really want to know what she thinks. I want her to go, good job. Yeah, you did a good job. You did a good job. Because sometimes she'll go, and I go, oh man, all that work. You don't have to say anymore. I know right now. We got to tear it down and start all over again, We depend upon that positive reinforcement. Well, when we don't get it, when the only thing we're hearing is how unskilled you are, how hopeless the cause is, even the walls you're building are not going to do anything. They're going to fall and crumble and fall apart. It's hard to motivate yourself to stay focused on that. They planned a secret attack on Nehemiah. They even had spies inside Jerusalem. There were Jews in Jerusalem who had allegiances with Tobiah. Probably some financial connections out there. And they were the ones who were giving Tobiah the inside scoop about what Nehemiah and his guys were doing. So think about this. Before you even could devise a plan, your enemy knows about it. This is where this thing is headed. They tried to frighten Nehemiah. In fact, they had one Jewish guy says, come, let's go to the temple. Let's get inside, fortify ourselves so they won't come and kill you. Because they're coming right now. And I'd be headed to the temple, But Nehemiah's like, I can't listen to these fearmongers. I have another agenda at hand. Can you share a situation where fear caused your insurmountable task to seem even more impossible? Or you didn't even feel like it was worth trying anymore? Just raise the white flag and call it quits. Well, Nehemiah didn't quit, did he? They built the wall. We said 2 to 5 miles. That's a pretty good guesstimate. They built the wall in 52 days. A little over 7 weeks. Yeah.
Do you think that they already had material, like the stones from the rubble from when the wall was torn down before? I mean, it's not like they had to go walking and grab stones. You think the stones were already pretty much close by?
So so here's my expertise with wall building, okay? But I've been over there, okay? And I know that a lot of construction throughout the history in that ancient part of the world was to take what was in place and already fallen down and build something new with it, all right? But I also know this, renovation work is 3 times harder than new construction, all right? So I think they had the footprint of the walls. They had some walls that were probably up but not totally torn down. Some were totally torn down. They had materials there to build with. They probably also had to go and find materials as well. So I think it was a hybrid of all those things together. Good point. Yeah, if you go over there now and you're there at the temple wall, you will see toppled right there that were toppled by the Romans in around 70 AD or whenever Jerusalem was defeated then. They're still laying there. They haven't been picked up and put back in place because of that, okay? So, is there something we can learn from Nehemiah to help us whenever the task is daunting, whenever the opposition is strong, whenever my fear overwhelms me, whenever I'm having to protect myself from both flanks here and I don't know what to do here? So here's 2 or 3 things that Nehemiah did. One, he kept his eye on the prize. No matter what was going on, Nehemiah kept looking ahead. I'll let you read later on, Nehemiah chapter 6, verse 1. Sanballat, who's the city-state general, okay, calls Nehemiah out for a conference. Okay? So he sends a messenger. Nehemiah, let's come out and talk. Nehemiah doesn't. Sends him 4 times, I think, a message. Come out. Nehemiah doesn't come out. Here's what Nehemiah says back every time. He says, I am carrying on a great project and cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave and go down to you? I mean, because I can make the case that, man, if Sanballat calls and he's going to make peace, I'll go in and do that. But there's a whole lot of reasons Sanballat would be calling you out that would not lead to peace and would not lead to the completion of the project. So Nehemiah kept saying, I got one job. I got to finish this wall here, and nothing's going to stop me. Nehemiah also trusted God to sustain him even when he felt depleted. He got on to all those nobility people for taking advantage of the poor people over here. One thing he was saying was this. He goes, we are busy, talking about himself, we're busy going out and buying back Jewish people who are enslaved to others so they can win their freedom, so they can come and do the project. And what you're doing is you are enslaving more people. So about the time we go and buy them back, you will have enslaved another one over here. He says this is, so one thing we know about Nehemiah is he's out there trying to free people with his own money or the money he brought with him or something. He's able to do that. The other thing he makes a point of is this. He goes, because he's in this process, he's been appointed the governor over Jerusalem, okay? And one thing he says is this: all the other governors before him, even those who were brought up as Jews, all the other governors before him would make sure that all their needs are met first. Now, every politician should be paid for their service, and their people of a certain level of importance have higher needs than I might have, over in St. Peter's. But Nehemiah was saying this: I have not taken any of the allowances that are rightfully mine as governor. While this project is going on, I'm not going to take any of that. I'm going to focus on this job. Which means that as much as everybody else was in poverty and couldn't harvest grain and couldn't sell grain and whatever else, Nehemiah was in the same boat. Now, he may have had more money tucked away somewhere, but still, he was not receiving what was rightfully his as governor. He was deferring that for the work of the project. In fact, he says, I'm hosting these nobility from Israel and other people that are coming in, trying to build alliances, trying to keep it. I am hosting big dinners for all these people, and I'm not taking a dime of what is rightly mine to pay for all this. So out of my own pocket, we're meeting this need. But the last thing, and the thing that comes up most often, is that Nehemiah prayed. And this is probably what's best known about the book of Nehemiah. Because there are somewhere around 14 prayers in this book. Book's just 13 chapters long. 14 prayers in this book. Now, some of them are just referred to or mentioned. A couple are just oaths that Nehemiah calls the people to take before God. We'll call that a prayer. There's one prayer in chapter 9 that is one of the longest single prayers in all the Bible. It's right there in the book of Nehemiah. And then there's a prayer that I like from chapter 6, verse 9. Go ahead and turn there. I'll let you look at that little prayer of Nehemiah. What's it? 4 words in Hebrew. I'm not sure what it is here in English here. What's his? Yeah, it's 4 words here. What's his prayer?
Strengthen my hands.
Yeah. We have classes oftentimes about prayer and how to understand prayer better and how to practice prayer better. And I think there's room for us to grow in long prayers, that really allows us to express and think through a lot of things as we're saying, But we all know these kind of prayers, don't we? Oh Lord, help me in this, right? And that's straight from Nehemiah, right? So sometimes those prayers were the powerful prayers that Nehemiah is praying. He praises God in his prayers. He confesses sin in his prayers. He recalls the promises of God made earlier in his prayers. God, we're doing this because you promised that you would restore us. So I'm doing this project based on that promise. I don't want to use the term claiming the promise too much because that carries with it a lot of baggage. But in essence, he was claiming the promise. God said he would restore us, and I'm doing this based on that promise. Yeah. He pleads for God's mercy for his people, and he asks God for things. So did you grow up, if you grew up in churches at all, learning the ACTS model of prayer? So, ACTS. So we have the ability to adore God, to give him praise and just tell him how good he is, to confess sins, to be thankful for things, supplication, to ask God for things. And sometimes people divide that up. Ask God for things for other people, ask God for things for myself. Some people are like, I can't really ask for me, just ask for others. That's not a biblical principle. Nehemiah wouldn't agree with that. He says, man, when the rubber meets the road and I'm facing this insurmountable task, you better believe me, I'm asking for God to help me accomplish the task that I've got. So all these prayers, Nehemiah is praying. How can prayer help sustain you when the task looks insurmountable? What is it about prayer that is sustaining?
You're asking the one person, God, he's the only, that's showing to God, and he's the one that can save you, or...
Yeah, so you're talking with the one person that has the ability to handle any insurmountable task. Good point. Sometimes with me, prayer is just, sometimes the peace comes just with the admission, I can't handle this. Because I spent half my life going, I got it. Don't worry about it. I got it. Just say, I can't handle this. Nehemiah closes, well, we don't have time to go in this. Nehemiah goes back to Susa. He comes back. Things are not, the walls are done, but things are not better. They've gotten worse. Just realize this. I mean, if you have the false belief that once you get the big project done, everything after that's going to be easy going, just realize that's not the case. You get one project done, and there's another laying out there. Okay, there's always a problem to deal with. But Nehemiah closes, and the whole last chapter, every prayer in the last chapter, I believe, Nehemiah says this: God, remember me for this. Remember me. And that's an interesting. Some people think Nehemiah is all about, hey, I did a great job, so remember me. I think Nehemiah is just saying, God, I served you the best I can. I stayed faithful. I worked hard. Just your mercy poured out on me. Okay? Remember me. Yes, ma'am.
He also he reminds God to remember the people who screwed things up.
Oh, yeah, there's another remembrance there, too. Yeah.
And I was talking to Chris, it's like, I've never prayed for God in hey, God, remember that bad stuff those other people did. Mm-hmm. As though we're asking God, in a sense, to punish them. Mm-hmm. That's a really unusual, I've never heard that in any sermon on prayer. Yeah,
there's a whole class of prayer in scriptures where it's asking God to call down his judgment on people who are evil or working against those who are good. And that doesn't play well in our Christian circle, but it's clearly part of scripture. Okay, for me, I've got to say I've got to watch that carefully, because I got to make sure that I'm in the right there, because I can call down God's judgment on a lot of people that may be.
Remember the plank in your eye.
Yeah. Jim said, remember the plank in your eye before you. Yeah. So I think I've got to be cautious about that. But I've done it before. I have.
One of the last, in season 2 of The Chosen, when the Sons of Thunder want to use God's power to bring fire on the
James and John calling down fire. Jesus, calls them the Sons of Thunder, and God. Now, but and that's a good point. They wanted to call down fire. Jesus says, back off. But Jesus himself is like, hey, a day is coming when the fire is going to show up. So it's not the judgment won't happen. It's just that it's got to happen with God's authority and his timing.
Well, Nehemiah took it into his own hands when he starts beating people and ripping out their hair at the end.
Well, yeah. So and it's hard. Yeah, there's some puzzling parts there. The last part, it's hard to know. There's nothing in the text that I know of that really shows that Nehemiah is that God is displeased with all that behavior, okay? But clearly Nehemiah is very angry and frustrated with the inability of the people to build upon what they've accomplished, you know. And yeah, because there was disobedience going on, taking advantage of people. There was intermarrying outside the nation. And when he comes back, he is very upset that all that had taken place. Yes?
There's something that I think is interesting in chapter 9, where the people have confessed all their sins and they've gone through this whole litany of things that they've done wrong and how God has forgiven them just for generations and over all the many years. But in the end, they say, do not let this hardship seem trifling in your eyes. And you know, it's easy sometimes to think, well, I'm going to hold off on the big prayer because this is just a little thing. I just have a little problem at work, or I can't get this car running right, or whatever. And so I just like that he says, do not let this hardship of ours seem trifling.
Yeah. You know, I have some people, you may have done it before too, I probably have too. Some people will come and ask you to pray for the strangest things, you know. And, you know, in my scope of things, I consider it not a valid, not a worthy topic for prayer, because it's such of little significance. But you know this, and I know it too. Everybody who brings something like that to a public venue and asks for prayer, they're telling you up front it's not minor to them, right? It is major to them. Maybe they should see the world in a broader sense. I get that, but there's no minor crises, and we need to be willing and able to take all those to God. Good point. All right, next week we're going to look at Esther. Okay, so join us. That's a good book. Got a holiday built right in there. Okay, so we're going to come and talk about that next week. All right, you guys have a great rest of the week. Thank you for joining us on Zoom. Sorry the experience was not, it was probably the same for you, but it's not the same for us because we couldn't see you and interact with you. But hopefully we'll get all that fixed by next week if Microsoft lets us. Okay, so all right, take care, guys. Have a good night.
Yeah, it was, at the beginning, you know, my wife already her depression was coming out, and my time was being work, and they ended up having issues along the way. So we got moved up to another place, and I thought, this is a good thing. Now they were trying to get rid of me. So that was a good, what I did was good, but I was inconsistent. And knowing it was more important to be consistent. But I ended up through all these moves, ending up Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it's like, would have never, you know, from the beginning, I always thought it was bad and then suddenly I realized this was a blessing that I got to where it was a blessing that God could do something good from my poor behavior. I don't think he caused my poor behavior. Just, he was able to do good stuff.
At 4 parts, so you can have a big break.
Oh, yeah.
It was a group effort. Scott and I worked on it, and I did pray, he did the trustees, and then we went to the grass and
So,
Well, they don't taste any different than the people that she's happy for her.
Yeah.
I was wondering who chose 10, whether it was her. I mean, she's,
Yeah.
that's her.
Normally, my kids eat breakfast earlier, and I thought, just keep that to Thursday at work. And we provided that contractor that we scheduled something, and today was like, the plumber's not coming.
Are you guys doing your project?
No.
My costume for about
Need my glasses and then go.
Still doing it? Still doing it. I know, because you didn't have it. We didn't have the ability to do that, did we, Anna?
She goes June 30th. She does have a little cloudiness. Jones said, oh, you're going to get that. Come in on the 30th and you take a leisure. But when I tell her how you're going, and I'll sit there and I said, well, what's this science? And she's, I had 2010. I got the cataract thing too, but boy, mine really took good. And she's reading everything.
Right there? No, that one.
But she does have this cloudy.
Hold it in.